Hello, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. I haven't filmed since I think the first week of medical school, and if you guys watched that video, I got COVID, missed my first week of orientation, failed my first quiz, so yeah, that was something. But it's obviously been, well, not obviously, it's now December 28th, so it's been a while, and lots has happened, kind of, not really, but it's, I finished my first semester of medical school, and I kind of just wanted to give an update and do kind of like a how my first semester of medical school went type video. This isn't going to be super structured. I don't have like tips necessarily, or I mean, I'll probably sprinkle them in the video, but I don't have like a structured message I want to get across. Like most of my videos I feel like have been like, okay, this is how you should do this is how you should do that. This is more just like I'm just gonna talk and see where it goes. If anyone's curious how med school is going so far. So if you're new here, my name is Amanda, and I'm a first year medical student at a medical school in New York. Can't speak. In New York City. And yeah, so I guess I'll just get right into it. So that first week was rough, for the first 2 weeks, because the first week was orientation, second week was like the first week of class that I failed my quiz. But things got better quickly after that. That first class I took was called Molecular, Cellular, and Genetic Foundations of Medicine. And I did really well in like on the midterm and the final. The quizzes I consistently didn't do that well in, and I passed all of them. But all the quizzes were in-house quizzes, whereas the midterm and the final were NBME. So I've always found that, like, not for med school, but like in undergrad, like, for example, the MCAT, I had a much easier time studying for than I did for like undergrad courses. And I think part of it is like, maybe it's just something I'm not good at, or maybe it's just hard for everyone, but kind of like figuring out what you're supposed to know is always kind of a challenge for me. And I feel like when you're using NBME materials or like third-party resources, it's very clear what you need to know. And so you're not wasting time on the wrong things. Whereas like in-house exams, it's like kind of unclear, like what's important, what isn't. Are you going to focus on one slide that you barely talked about, or are you going to ask big picture questions? Like it's always been hard for me. So I did really well on the NBME style stuff, which is good. I also I attended lecture the very first day. I went to the very first lecture, and then I went home, even though there was more lectures. And then I basically didn't watch lecture ever again, with one exception, which we'll talk about in a second. But I basically immediately became a third-party resource girl. I feel like I just learn better when it's like very straightforward, like this is what you need to know, and the rest of it you don't. Like, I just think it gives me peace of mind, and the questions tend to be like the AMBOSS or USMLERX or UWorld tend to be like stress tested, right? So like if the wording is unclear, like usually they'll have worked on that such that the question is not unclear. Whereas I feel like with in-house exams, it's kind of like, well, the professor thought it was fair, so deal with it. So anyway, quizzes for that first block were kind of like meh, but I did really well on the midterm and the final. I basically right away started using Boards and Beyond, Physio, AMBOSS. So that's what I did, and it worked for me. And then our second block was anatomy. Anatomy was really hard. It was actually, I think, the course I did the best in, or maybe like on par with another one. but it was the hardest in terms of feeling like the volume of information. Like I just couldn't get to all the information. It was also especially difficult to know, like, kind of like I was saying earlier, like, what do I need to know? So for this class, our quizzes were from AMBOSS, which was good. I did really well on those. But then our midterm and our final had two parts. Our midterm had a practical and an NBME component, and our final had a practical and an NBME component. So the NBME stuff, I felt very confident throughout. Like I knew that if I watched the Boards and Beyond or the physio video and just did practice questions, like I was solid. The practical stuff was really hard for me to study for because again, it's up to the discretion of like the whims of professors, which sometimes can be very fair, but sometimes not. And I think there was also sort of like a dissonance between like, okay, this material is fair versus this isn't. Like I think professors had different opinions about what was and wasn't. And also there wasn't a direct message about like, okay, like you do need to know this stuff, but you don't need to know this stuff. Like some professors would come around and say, you don't need to know this stuff. And then a different professor would come around an hour later and say, no, you do need to know this stuff. This stuff is really important. So you're just like, okay, like I don't know what to prioritize. I don't know what's important, what isn't. And it's like, yeah, technically everything's important, but like there's only so many hours in the day, and like it would be helpful to have an idea of like, you do need to know all the nerves, or you don't need to know all the nerves. Like these are the nerves you do need to know. So it was just really stressful. Also being in lab, like basically 9 to 4 every day was rough. Like I love studying from home in my apartment with my like monitor set up with a cat in my lap. Like that's ideal versus like, okay, I have to be on campus at 9 a.m. I have to like sit there or stand there with my cadaver and like kind of root around and like, oh, I think that's this artery or I think that's this nerve. And then you have to wait for a TA to confirm. And by the time they come here, you've already moved on. And then you're like, oh, I forgot what I was going to ask you. And then you show them and they're like, no, that's actually not that artery. That's a vein. And that's a completely different vein than the one you were thinking of. And then you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Had no idea, but thanks. I will take that under consideration. And then 2 hours later, they're like, oh, you actually don't need to know that vein. And then you're just like, like, I can't do this anymore. So that was anatomy in a nutshell. The material itself isn't hard. It's just like, whatever. It's just hard to know what to know. So after anatomy, we moved into microbiology and immunology, which is very different pace in the sense that we're no longer on campus, like looking at our cadavers. We're mostly like at home, like watching videos and whatever. And by the way, for anatomy, didn't watch a single lecture. Refused. I was just like, this, I don't think it's helpful. And look, like some people did and some people still do watch lecture. I just kind of became a non-lecture watcher and it worked for me. I feel like I'm using my time efficiently. I'm not like having to watch both lecture and then also supplement with outside material to understand what the lecture said. Like I feel like I'm using my time effectively, and I think like as much as I've said like anatomy was hard and this was hard and whatever, I really feel like I've had a very balanced first semester. I haven't felt that stressed, to be honest. I have been getting 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep every night. I finish my studying promptly at like 9, regardless of what I have left. Like usually I just kind of cut it because that's just like important to me. And I don't wake up earlier than I have to. So like if I don't have a mandatory thing, I wake up at 8 or 9. If I need to sleep in more, I'll sleep in more. So I've been able to maintain that pace while still doing really well on exams. I've consistently been doing above average. And I'm not saying this to brag, but I think if you guys have watched my videos, you know that I struggled a lot in undergrad, and I guess I just don't take it for granted that I'm doing well now, because it wasn't necessarily a given. It's not a given for anyone, but I felt especially like, well, I don't know, like I didn't get a 4.0 in undergrad. Like, I don't know if I'm going to be, like, I remember in undergrad consistently doing like, under average every single exam. And it was like a horrible feeling. So my point is, I'm just saying that in case you're also someone who, just hasn't been like perfect their entire career. It's weird to say career because I don't have a career yet, but their whole sort of academic life, it can be done, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's just a matter of using the right resources, having friends. I think that's really underrated, like having friends who like tell you like, no, that was covered, like you do need to watch that, and you're like, oh, I missed that. Or you'll be like, oh, this is this, right? They're like, no, that's not how that works. Like, this is actually how it works. Like having people who are smarter than you in some topics, like help you and study with them every now and then and just keep you on track on like what you should be doing more or less. Obviously you should have a sense of that yourself, but it is helpful to have like an idea of like, okay, is everyone on the same page? Like, did I miss something big? Like, So anyway, that was a big tangent. Back to microbiology and immunology. Also didn't watch lecture. I really was just doing a lot of like sketchy and Pixarize, and it was a lot of work. Like, it was a lot of information all the time. But especially during micro and immuno, I kind of just got used to getting ahead on the weekends, which I think if you're coming into medical school and you have a priority of like, I want to have my weekends free, that's totally doable. I kind of didn't have that and don't have that. It's more important to me that on a day-to-day basis, I'm like finishing around the same time and waking up around the same time. Meaning that I'm not like, oh, I have to stay up till like 2 a.m. or I have to wake up early to finish something. Like, that's just, I hate doing that. And so to me, it was more important that like every day is not similarly difficult, but like during the week, I'm working sort of like, I don't know, 9 to 7, not straight through. Obviously, I go to the gym, I have lunch, I take breaks, whatever. And then during the weekend, I maybe work 3 hours on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, or 1 and 2, depending on how much I have. But I rather do that and put some work in on the weekends than like push myself during the week and push myself into like I have to stay up till 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 a.m. Like, that's just not me. And so that's what works for me. So especially during micro and immuno, I kind of got in the habit of trying to get ahead a little bit. Especially since I'm not watching lecture, I really have no reason to wait for a lecture. I would just look at the PowerPoints, be like, okay, we covered these 10 bugs today, so I'm gonna watch some of the videos this weekend. So yeah, and then finished micro and immuno, and then we had Thanksgiving break, and then we took pathology, which was about 3 weeks, and that is the only course so far that I've actually pretty consistently watched lecture. I still supplemented with like pathoma and stuff like that, but the lecturer was just phenomenal. And for whatever reason, we went from using Amboss for our quizzes to going back to in-house quizzes, similar to our first block. So basically our first block was in-house quizzes and BME midterm and BME final. Second block was Amboss quizzes and BME midterm and BME final. Third block was, an anatomy was like plus the practical. Then third block was Amboss quizzes and BME midterm and BME exam. And then our fourth block, pathology, was in-house quizzes, no midterm, and BME exam. So because quizzes were in-house, it was in my best interest to watch lecture. I did, and the quizzes were very fair, thankfully. So I felt that by watching lecture, I was able to do super well in the quizzes. And then there was no midterm, so that's that. And then the final, I just, through a combination of like AMBOSS and USMLE-RX and Pathoma, I also really did well in the final. So yeah, that's kind of academics wise how I approached it, and like what I did for the most part. Okay, quick break. I was interrupted by a cat who is now sitting on me. Let me put this back where it was. Okay. That definitely, it's not in the same position, but it's fine. Biscuit. Okay, anyway. What was I saying? So yeah, that's kind of how things went in terms of academics. In terms of everything else, let's see. I got a little bit involved, or quite a bit involved in research. Research is hard, I feel like, and not the actual pursuit of research, although that is obviously challenging, but finding projects and finding mentors and like getting people to put you on things is really challenging, and it's something that I wasn't really anticipating for medical school. I kind of thought that like in undergrad it was really hard to find research, and I didn't get any publications or anything in undergrad, even though I did do research. I just like I just never found a PI that was like, yeah, I'll put you on a paper. Like I didn't even know to ask. So I think I was kind of like, well, that's normal for undergrad, like whatever. But I thought like, okay, well, once you're a med student, like academic physicians, they get it. Like they'll put you on stuff. And it's like, at least where I'm going, like not really. And it's been sort of an unexpected challenge for me, because I really thought the more challenging part would be the actual academics. But once I got a handle on that, I was like, okay, I can move on to extracurriculars. And it's actually been harder to figure that out and navigate that than it has to navigate school, for me personally. And you know, I change my mind every day about what I'm interested in, but I do want to sort of like prepare for the most competitive specialty I'm interested in. So that's what I've been doing. And yeah, it's just been a lot harder than I was expecting. There's also, I think, an expectation to kind of like already have a niche / like an idea to like come to the PI with, like, oh, I have an idea for a project, this is the idea. And although I know that now, and so now I can kind of like go into pitching things, or when I'm finding a mentor, I can kind of go into it with that perspective. I didn't know that at first. I kind of thought it would be the opposite. Like, well, these people don't know you, so maybe, you know, you'll email them, be like, hey, this is my name, I'm interested in this specialty. Do you have anything you're working on that I can help with? And then they would like put you on something simple, see how you do. And then once they see that you are trustworthy and like on top of it, then they can like give you more responsibility and be like, do you have any ideas, or do you want to be on this paper or whatever? And it really, at least so far, and obviously every PI, every like physician, whatever, is different, but in general, it hasn't really panned out that way. It's been more like, okay, we'll hop on a Zoom call, and they're like, so like, do you have any ideas? And you're just like, oh, no, like I'm like, no, I'm early in, like I'm keeping an open mind. And they're like, well, we might have a project, I don't know, I'll keep an open mind, I'll keep you in mind. And then it's like, okay, like I'm a first year medical student. I wasn't aware that I had to have this like, oh, I know exactly what the literature needs, like I know this gap in the literature. It's like, I just got here. Like, but at the same time, I know how competitive certain specialties are, a lot of specialties, and like I don't want to be at a disadvantage, so it's better if I start soon. But like I'm obviously not going to do rotations until third year, so I'm not going to have the clinical sort of like background to know like what areas need investigation, but I can't wait till third year, so I have to start now. So I don't know, I think it's just been frustrating to not have someone just be like, I'm so glad you're interested in this specialty, you know, let me put you on this, we're doing this really exciting thing, like I can't wait to work together. It's more like you're kind of a nuisance. And that's not everyone. Even still, I've managed to get on projects, but I've really fought for it. I have taken the initiative to like start my own project, but not necessarily within the fields that I'm considering, just sort of a separate like thing that I'm interested in. But I don't know, in terms of like finding good mentors in the fields that I'm interested in, both for research and just in general, it's been really hard. And I don't know if it's a result of the culture at my institution. I don't know if it's New York. I don't know if it's all of medicine. Like, I really have no idea. I have no sort of like comparison. But I don't know, it's been hard. And I think I also have high expectations. Like, I am ready to work, and like I want to be put on so many things. So like even if I have like one project going, I'm like, okay, well I did my part. And the thing with research is it's very like cyclical. Like you do your part and then you have to wait for other people. So I'm like, okay, I want to have many things going on so that I can do my part, and then while I'm waiting for that person, I can do this other part of this other project. Like, I don't know, I just feel very like ready to work. Like I am ready to grind for the next 4 years, and I feel like I'm not being given the opportunity despite really seeking it out. And I think that's the hard part. Like, I want to put in the work, but it's really hard to even find people to give you work when it comes to research. So yeah, I don't know, I think that's been an unexpected challenge, and I really didn't anticipate that. But you know, we're gonna keep plowing ahead and see what happens. I'm obviously very early in my med school career, but yeah, so I don't know, what other aspects of medical school have I not talked about? I've been yapping for a long time, so I feel like this is probably a good place to end it. So I guess I'll recap, but in general, I've really loved medical school and like the friendships I've made and the things I'm learning, and I'm also just overall very proud of myself for doing so well, and just like, I don't know, just like handling the transition well, and at the same time, I've been quite frustrated with the sort of, I guess we could call it like the hidden curriculum of medical school, right? Like, yes, I know what to do to get good grades, but like that's not all that matters for residency applications, especially since we're pass fail now, and step 1 is pass fail. So it's like, okay, how do I network? Like, what does that even mean? I think that sort of like gray area of medicine has been quite challenging, which, you know, I'm grateful that it's just that and not that and the academics, but it's still frustrating. But I don't know, I'm also like, I'm just happy to be here, you know, like I'm trying my best, and I know at the end of the day, whatever happens, like I tried and I'm continuing to try, so it'll all be okay. It's all fine. But as long as I'm being transparent about like my experience, you know, it's important to talk about the good and maybe not so good. So yeah, I think I'll end it here. I hope that was enjoyable. It was kind of free form, but I hope that, you know, it was interesting. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.